Billionaire attended a wedding smiling, until his ex walked in holding a newborn baby. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The crystal chandeliers of the Riverside Manor cast golden light across the reception hall, illuminating faces flushed with champagne and laughter. Theo Lancaster adjusted his platinum cufflinks, his steel-gray eyes scanning the crowd with the practiced indifference of a man who had learned to keep the world at arm's length. At 35, he possessed the kind of devastating handsomeness that made heads turn. Sharp jawline, dark hair perfectly styled, and a 6'2" frame that filled his custom Tom Ford tuxedo like it was designed specifically for him. Lancaster, there you are. David Morrison, the groom, approached with his characteristic grin, still glowing from his ceremony. I was starting to think you'd bail on me. Theo's lips curved into that calculated smile he'd perfected in boardrooms across Silicon Valley. And miss watching you surrender your freedom? Never. He raised his glass of Dom Perignon. Congratulations, David. Claire looked beautiful. Thanks, man. I know weddings aren't exactly your scene these days, but it means a lot that you're here. David's expression softened slightly. I know the past couple years have been ancient history. Theo cut him off smoothly, though something flickered behind his composed mask. The divorce, the aftermath, the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself since then. I'm exactly where I need to be. David nodded, understanding the dismissal. As CEO of one of the most successful cybersecurity firms in the country, Theo Lancaster had become a master at controlling conversations just as expertly as he controlled his business empire. Nothing touched him that he didn't allow to touch him. The orchestra began playing a soft jazz melody and couples drifted toward the dance floor. Theo found himself at the bar, ordering another champagne, not because he needed it, but because it gave his hands something to do. He surveyed the room with the detached interest of someone watching a movie. These people, with their messy emotions and vulnerable hearts, seemed to exist in a different universe from his own. Mr. Lancaster? A young server appeared at his elbow. There's someone at the entrance asking about table arrangements. The wedding planner is busy and not my problem, Theo replied without looking away from his drink. I'm just a guest. But as he spoke, something shifted in the atmosphere of the room. Conversations began to quiet and he noticed several heads turning toward the main entrance. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd like wind through wheat. Theo felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. Slowly, almost against his will, he turned toward the grand double doors, and his world stopped. She stood framed in the doorway like a vision from another life, one he'd spent 18 months trying to forget. Scarlet Hayes. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, catching the light and setting it on fire. The sage green dress she wore hugged her curves with elegant simplicity, making her pale skin seem to glow from within. But it wasn't her beauty that stole his breath, though she remained the most stunning woman he'd ever seen. It was what she carried in her arms. A baby, 9 months old, maybe 10, with dark hair that curled at the edges and eyes that seemed to take in everything with solemn curiosity. The child wore a tiny navy blue outfit that somehow made him look both adorable and serious. Theo's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor in a spray of crystal and liquid. The sound seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet room. The baby turned his head at the noise, and Theo found himself staring into a pair of gray eyes, his own eyes, set in a face that was unmistakably a miniature version of his own. The same strong jawline, still soft with baby fat. The same way of furrowing his brow when concentrating. Even the way the child's mouth quirked slightly to one side was achingly familiar. Scarlett's gaze found his across the crowded room, and for a moment, time suspended itself between them. Her green eyes held a mixture of defiance and something that might have been fear. She lifted her chin in that stubborn way he remembered so well, as if daring him to make a scene. Jesus Christ, David whispered beside him, having followed his stare. Is that Scarlett? Theo managed, his voice barely audible. His heart was hammering against his ribs so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. The room seemed to tilt on its axis, and he gripped the edge of the bar to steady himself. The child, his son, because there was no denying it now, babbled something unintelligible and reached toward the glittering chandelier above. Scarlett smiled down at him with such tenderness that it physically hurt Theo to watch. She whispered something to the baby, who giggled and clapped his tiny hands together. I need Theo started, then stopped. He needed what? Air? Answers? A time machine to go back 18 months and figure out where everything had gone so catastrophically wrong? Several guests were openly staring now, their whispered conversations creating a buzz of speculation. Theo could practically hear the gossip mills spinning to life. The legendary Theo Lancaster, who never showed emotion in public, standing frozen like a statue while his ex-wife introduced the world to a child he'd never known existed. Scarlett began moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations and making small talk as if she belonged here, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of his carefully controlled life. The baby gurgled happily in her arms, completely oblivious to the chaos his presence was causing. She was heading this way. What did you say to the woman who had disappeared from your life without explanation, only to reappear carrying the child you never knew you had? Theo forced himself to breathe as Scarlett approached, each step she took feeling like a countdown to an explosion he wasn't prepared for. She moved with that same graceful confidence he remembered, but there was something different about her now, a maturity, a strength that seemed to radiate from her very core. Motherhood had changed her in ways that went deeper than the physical. Theo. Her voice was steady when she finally reached him, though he caught the slight tremor beneath the surface. The baby in her arms looked up at him with those impossibly familiar gray eyes, and Theo felt his knees threaten to buckle. Scarlett. He managed to keep his voice level, though inside he was screaming. Interesting choice of venue for a reunion. She shifted the baby to her other hip, and Theo noticed how naturally the movement came to her, how perfectly the child fitted against her side, as if they were two pieces of the same puzzle. David invited me. He thought I should know that old friends were getting married. Old friends. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. They had once been so much more than friends. They had been everything to each other, until they weren't. The baby reached out suddenly, his tiny fingers grasping toward Theo's tie. Without thinking, Theo stepped back, and something painful flashed across Scarlett's face before she composed herself. "This is Oliver," she said quietly, adjusting the child so he faced away from Theo. "Ollie, can you wave hello?" Oliver. Theo's throat constricted. She had named him Oliver. "He's beautiful," Theo said, and meant it. The words came out rougher than he intended. "How old?" 9 months. Scarlett's green eyes met his directly, unflinching. "He was born February 14th. Theo's mind raced backward, calculating dates. February. 9 months. That meant May. Late May. Almost 18 months ago. Just before everything had fallen apart between them. Just before she had started pulling away, becoming distant and cold in ways he hadn't understood. "Valentine's Day," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Ironic, isn't it?" There was no humor in her smile. "Love's biggest celebration, and I spent it in labor alone." The word alone hit him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to respond, but David appeared at his shoulder, clearly sensing the tension crackling between them. "Scarlett, my God, you look incredible." David leaned in to kiss her cheek, his eyes immediately dropping to Oliver. "And this little guy. Wow, he's got the Lancaster eyes, doesn't he?" The silence that followed was deafening. Theo could feel his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack under the weight of everyone's stares. Several nearby guests had stopped their conversations entirely, clearly straining to hear every word. "David," Scarlett said gracefully, "congratulations on your wedding." Claire looked absolutely radiant during the ceremony. "Thank you. Listen, I hope you don't mind that I didn't mention to Theo that you were coming. I thought," David glanced nervously between them. "Well, I thought maybe it was time." "Time for what?" Theo's voice came out sharper than he intended, drawing more attention from nearby tables. "Maybe we should discuss this somewhere more private," Scarlett suggested, bouncing Oliver gently as he began to fuss. The baby's small whimpers seemed to pierce straight through Theo's chest. "The garden," David offered quickly. "It's quiet out there. I'll make sure you're not disturbed." Theo nodded stiffly, not trusting himself to speak. He followed Scarlett through the French doors onto the manor's terrace, hyper-aware of every whisper that followed in their wake. The cool evening air hit his face like a slap, clearing some of the fog from his mind. The garden was illuminated by strings of fairy lights, creating an almost magical atmosphere that felt completely at odds with the emotional battlefield he was about to enter. Scarlett settled onto a stone bench near a fountain, positioning Oliver on her lap so he could see the dancing water. "He likes the sound," she explained when Theo remained standing. "It calms him down." "Scarlett." Theo's voice was raw. "Is he mine?" She looked up at him then. and he saw everything in her eyes: hurt, anger, exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. What do you think? I think you disappeared from my life without a word of explanation 18 months ago. I think you're now holding a child who looks exactly like I did as a baby. And I think you just told me he was born 9 months after we— He couldn't finish the sentence. After we what, Theo? After we made love? You can't even say it. She stood up, holding Oliver protectively against her chest. That's exactly why I left. You left because we had sex? The words exploded out of him louder than he'd intended. Oliver startled at the sound, and Scarlett immediately began swaying to comfort him. Lower your voice, she hissed. And no, I left because you treated me like I was nothing more than a convenient arrangement. Because every time I tried to get close to you, really close, you found a way to push me away. Because I realized that you weren't capable of loving anyone except yourself. The accusation hit him like a physical blow. That's not true, isn't it? Scarlett's eyes flashed with old pain. When was the last time you told me you loved me without me saying it first? When was the last time we had a conversation about anything that mattered? When was the last time you looked at me like I was more than just another acquisition in your perfect life? Theo stared at her, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Because the terrible truth was, he couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing Scarlett as the vibrant, passionate woman he'd fallen in love with, and started seeing her as just another part of his routine. I found out I was pregnant 3 days after you told me you thought we should take a break to reassess our priorities. Scarlett continued, her voice breaking slightly. 3 days, Theo. I was going to tell you, but then I realized that a baby would just be another priority for you to reassess. Oliver began to babble, reaching for his mother's hair. Scarlett smiled down at him with such pure love that Theo felt something crack inside his chest. So you just left, he said quietly. I protected us both, she corrected. I protected you from having to pretend you wanted a family, and I protected my son from growing up thinking his father saw him as an obligation. The fountain continued to bubble beside them, filling the silence with its gentle music. Theo watched Oliver's tiny fingers explore the pearl buttons on Scarlett's dress, and for the first time in 18 months, he felt something other than the cold numbness he'd wrapped around himself like armor. He felt fury, pure, burning rage at himself for being the kind of man who could drive away the best thing that had ever happened to him, for being so emotionally stunted that the woman he'd loved had felt safer raising their child alone than trusting him with the truth. I want a DNA test, he said finally. Scarlett's expression didn't change. Fine, but I'm not doing this for money, Theo. I don't want your financial support. Then what do you want? She stood up, cradling Oliver against her shoulder. The baby's eyes were drooping with sleep, and he made soft cooing sounds that seemed to echo in the quiet garden. I want you to meet your son, she said simply. I want Oliver to know who his father is. And then I want you to decide, honestly, whether you're capable of being the kind of father he deserves. Before Theo could respond, she was walking away, leaving him alone in the garden, with the scent of jasmine and the weight of 18 months' worth of missed opportunities crushing down on him. Through the French doors, he could see her rejoining the reception, accepting congratulations, and making polite conversation as if she hadn't just turned his entire world upside down. Oliver's dark head was visible over her shoulder, and even from this distance Theo could see the child's resemblance to himself, his son. He had a son, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Theo didn't return to the reception. Instead, he found himself in his Aston Martin gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The engine purred beneath him, but he made no move to drive. Through the windshield he could see guests beginning to spill out of the manor, their laughter echoing in the cool night air. He pulled out his phone and stared at Scarlett's contact information, still there after all these months, though he'd told himself 100 times to delete it. His thumb hovered over her name, but what could he possibly say in a text message? Sorry, I missed the birth of our son because I was too emotionally unavailable to notice you were pulling away for a reason. A tap on his window made him look up. David stood outside, his bow tie loosened and his hair slightly mussed from dancing. Theo rolled down the window. You planning to sit out here all night? David asked, leaning against the car, thinking about it. Claire's talking to Scarlett inside. Women's bathroom summit, I think. David's expression was serious. She wanted me to tell you that Scarlett's staying at the Marriott downtown, room 1247. Theo's heart jumped. Did she ask you to tell me that? No. Claire wormed it out of her and then threatened to withhold wedding cake from me if I didn't pass it along. David paused. Look, I know this is complicated, but that kid, Theo, he's your spitting image. Even the way he grabs things with his left hand first, just like you used to do when we were roommates at Stanford. The observation hit Theo unexpectedly hard. He remembered David teasing him about being left-handed in a right-handed world, how it made him approach everything differently. The idea that Oliver might have inherited that trait, that small piece of himself, made the whole situation feel suddenly, overwhelmingly real. I don't know how to be a father, Theo said quietly. Nobody does, until they are one. But you're one hell of a problem solver when you want to be. David straightened up. The question is, do you want to be? 20 minutes later, Theo found himself standing outside room 1247 at the Marriott, his hand raised to knock but frozen in midair. From inside, he could hear the soft murmur of Scarlett's voice, singing something gentle and melodic, a lullaby. He knocked softly. The singing stopped. Footsteps approached the door, and he heard the security chain rattle as she checked the peephole. Theo, her voice was muffled by the door. It's me. Several seconds passed before she opened the door. She'd changed out of her green dress into yoga pants and an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger this way, more like the woman he'd fallen in love with. He's sleeping, she said without preamble. If you wake him up, you're the one dealing with the consequences. Theo nodded and followed her into the hotel room. It was a standard suite, but Scarlett had transformed it into something that felt like home. Baby supplies were neatly organized on the dresser. A portable crib was set up by the window, and soft classical music played from her phone. The whole space smelled like baby powder and that citrus perfume she'd always worn. Oliver lay in the crib, one tiny fist curled against his cheek, his dark lashes casting shadows on his pale skin. He was perfect. Absolutely, heartbreakingly perfect. He's a good sleeper, Scarlett said quietly, settling into the room's single armchair. Most of the time. Teething has been rough, though. Theo couldn't take his eyes off the baby. He's so small. He's actually pretty big for his age. 95th percentile for height. There was pride in her voice. Doctor says he's going to be tall like his father. The casual way she said it, like his father, made Theo's chest tighten. He moved closer to the crib, studying Oliver's sleeping face. The resemblance was undeniable, but more than that, there was something about the child that felt familiar in a way that went beyond genetics. Can I? Theo started, then stopped. Touch him? Yes. Just be gentle. Theo reached out with one finger and gently traced Oliver's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around his, gripping with surprising strength. The contact sent an electric shock through Theo's entire system. This was his son holding on to him. He's got a strong grip, Theo whispered. Tell me about it. He grabbed my hair during the ceremony today and wouldn't let go. I thought I was going to have to cut it off. Scarlett's smile was soft, maternal. He's curious about everything, always reaching for things, trying to put them in his mouth. The teething? 2 teeth so far, bottom front ones. He's working on the top ones now, which is why he's been fussy. She paused. Not that you would know about any of this. The gentle accusation hung in the air between them. Theo carefully extracted his finger from Oliver's grasp and turned to face her. I would have been there, Scarlett, if I had known. Would you? Her green eyes were steady, searching. Really? Or would you have convinced yourself it was better handled by nannies and boarding schools? The question hit too close to home. Theo's own childhood had been exactly that. A series of hired caregivers and prestigious institutions while his parents focused on building their business empire. He'd sworn he would never do that to his own children. But now, faced with the reality of a child, he wasn't sure he knew any other way. I don't know, he admitted, but I would have tried. Trying isn't enough, Theo. Not for him. Scarlett gestured toward the crib. He deserves better than someone who's just trying. He deserves a father who wants to be there, who puts him first, who shows up even when it's hard. And you don't think I can be that person? Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. I think you could be. I used to believe you wanted to be, but wanting and doing are 2 very different things. Oliver stirred in his sleep, making soft baby sounds that tugged at something primal in Theo's chest. Without thinking, he reached out again, this time placing his palm gently on the baby's back. Oliver immediately settled, as if his father's touch was exactly what he needed. He knows you, Scarlett said softly, and there was wonder in her voice. Somehow he knows. Theo felt tears threatening for the first time in years. This tiny person, His son trusted him instinctively, completely, in a way that terrified and amazed him in equal measure. "I want the DNA test," he said finally. "Not because I doubt you, but because I need it to be official, legal." Scarlett nodded. "We can do it tomorrow." "And then what?" "Then you decide what kind of father you want to be, and I decide whether I can trust you with the most important thing in my world." Oliver's breathing was deep and even, the picture of innocent sleep. Theo imagined all the moments he'd already missed. First smiles, first laughs, first attempts at crawling. 18 months of his son's life, gone forever. "Why didn't you try harder to tell me?" he asked. "Why didn't you fight for us?" Scarlett's expression grew sad. "Because I was fighting, Theo. Every day I was fighting to save our marriage, to get you to see me, to make you understand that I needed more from you than just your presence in the same room. But you were so wrapped up in your work, your deals, your perfectly controlled life, that you never noticed I was drowning." She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified, not of being a mother, but of watching you treat our child the same way you had started treating me, like an obligation to be managed rather than a person to be loved." The words cut deep because they were true. Somewhere along the way, Theo had stopped seeing Scarlett as his partner and started seeing her as another item on his to-do list. Dinner with wife? Check. Buy wife anniversary gift? Check. Attend wife's gallery opening? Check. "I was trying to build something for us," he said weakly. "The company, the success. I thought that's what you wanted." "I wanted you," Scarlett said simply. "I wanted the man I married, the one who used to talk to me for hours about everything and nothing, the one who brought me coffee in bed and remembered that I liked to sleep with the window open. I wanted the Theo who saw me as more than just another piece of his perfect life." Oliver made a small sound in his sleep, and both adults immediately looked toward the crib, but he was still sleeping peacefully, one hand now flung above his head in complete abandon. "He's going to wake up hungry soon," Scarlett said, "and when he does, he's going to want me, because I'm all he's ever known." The implication was clear. Theo was a stranger to his own son, and if he wanted to change that, he was going to have to prove himself worthy of the chance. Theo hadn't slept. He'd returned to his penthouse at 3 in the morning, but instead of going to bed, he'd stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights blur through exhausted eyes. Every time he closed them, he saw Oliver's tiny face, felt the surprising strength of those small fingers wrapped around his own. At 7 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Scarlett. "DNA appointment at 10. Genesis Medical Center on 5th Street. Don't be late." He was there at 9:30, pacing the parking lot like a man facing execution rather than confirmation of what he already knew in his bones. When Scarlett's silver Honda pulled up, Theo felt his breath catch. Through the rear window, he could see Oliver's car seat, and the sight of it, this tangible proof of a life he'd never been part of, hit him harder than he'd expected. Scarlett emerged, looking like she'd slept as poorly as he had. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, and she moved with the efficient grace of a woman who had learned to do everything one-handed while carrying a baby. "Good morning," she said, her tone carefully neutral as she opened the back door to retrieve Oliver. "Morning." Theo stepped closer, unable to help himself. In the daylight, his son was even more beautiful, and the resemblance even more striking. Oliver was awake and alert, his gray eyes taking in everything with serious curiosity. He wore tiny jeans and a red t-shirt that read, "Future Heartbreaker," and Theo felt an unexpected surge of pride. "He's in a good mood today," Scarlett said, noticing Theo's intense stare. "He slept through the night for the first time in a week." "That's good?" Theo wasn't sure if it was a question or a statement. "Very good. It means he's not teething as badly today." She hefted the diaper bag over her shoulder with practiced ease. "You ready for this?" The DNA test itself was simple. A quick cheek swab for both Theo and Oliver. The baby fussed a little at the unfamiliar sensation, but Scarlett soothed him with soft words and gentle touches. Watching her with Oliver was like watching a master class in unconditional love, and Theo found himself mesmerized by the easy intimacy between mother and son. "Results will be available in 3 business days," the technician informed them as they prepared to leave. "Though given the obvious resemblance, I'm not sure why you need confirmation." Outside the medical center, Scarlett paused by her car. Oliver had fallen asleep in his carrier, his head lolling to one side in the boneless way only babies could manage. "What now?" Theo asked. Scarlett looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "Are you hungry?" "What?" "It's almost lunchtime. Oliver will need to eat soon, and honestly, I could use some coffee that doesn't come from a hotel room pot." She hesitated. "There's a family restaurant about 10 minutes from here. They have high chairs." Theo felt something leap in his chest. Was she inviting him to spend time with them? "You want me to come?" "I think—" Scarlett adjusted Oliver's blanket with gentle hands. "I think maybe it's time we had a real conversation about what this looks like going forward." The restaurant was exactly the kind of place Theo never went to. Bright and cheerful, with checkered tablecloths and a children's menu printed with cartoon animals. But as Scarlett expertly set up Oliver's high chair and began the familiar routine of baby feeding, Theo found himself fascinated rather than uncomfortable. "He eats real food now," Scarlett explained as she spooned what looked like mashed sweet potatoes into Oliver's eager mouth. "Loves sweet potatoes, hates peas, and will do anything for bananas." Oliver babbled happily between bites, occasionally reaching out to grab the spoon or pat his hands in the orange mess on his tray. When he looked at Theo, he smiled, a wide, gummy grin that revealed his two tiny bottom teeth. "He's smiling at me," Theo said, wonder evident in his voice. "He smiles at everyone. He's a very social baby." But Scarlett's tone was fond, not dismissive. "The pediatrician says it's a sign of good development, social engagement. You take him to regular checkups? Every month for the first year. Vaccinations, measurements, developmental milestones." She wiped Oliver's face with practiced efficiency. "He's perfectly healthy. Advanced for his age in some areas." "Which areas?" "Motor skills. He's been trying to pull himself up to standing for weeks now. And he's very vocal. Lots of babbling. Different sounds. Dr. Martinez thinks he might walk early." Theo absorbed this information, realizing how much he didn't know about child development, about what was normal and what wasn't. "Do you have pictures? From when he was smaller?" Scarlett's hand paused on the baby wipe. "Thousands of them. I'd like to see them, if that's okay." She pulled out her phone and handed it to him. "Start from the beginning. February." The photos were a chronicle of a life Theo had never been part of. Oliver as a tiny newborn, red-faced and wrinkled. His first smile at 6 weeks, rolling over at 4 months, sitting up unassisted at 6 months. Each image was a missed moment, a memory that belonged to Scarlett alone. "This one's my favorite," Scarlett said, pointing to a picture of Oliver at about 7 months, sitting in a high chair with what appeared to be spaghetti sauce covering every visible surface, including his hair. He was grinning widely, clearly delighted with the mess he'd made. "He looks—" Theo paused, studying the image. "He looks exactly like I did when I was little. My mother has a picture of me at about the same age, covered in chocolate cake." "Really?" There was surprise in Scarlett's voice. "I'll show you sometime." The words came out before he could stop them, and he immediately wondered if he'd overstepped. But Scarlett didn't pull away. Instead, she said quietly, "I'd like that." Oliver finished his lunch and immediately began trying to climb out of his high chair, babbling insistently and reaching toward the floor. "He wants down," Scarlett explained. "He's at the stage where he wants to explore everything." "Is that safe? In a restaurant?" "As long as we watch him closely. He can cruise along furniture now, holding on and walking sideways." There was pride in her voice. "Want to see?" She lifted Oliver out of his chair and set him on his feet next to their table. Immediately he grabbed onto the edge and began moving sideways, his chubby legs working hard to keep him upright. When he reached the corner of the table, he looked back at both adults with an expression of pure triumph. "Did you see that?" Theo found himself grinning. "He's actually walking. Cruising," Scarlett corrected. But she was smiling too. "Real walking comes next." Oliver continued his journey around the table, and when he reached Theo's chair, he stopped and looked up. Without hesitation, he let go of the table and reached both arms toward Theo. "He wants you to pick him up," Scarlett said softly. Theo's heart began racing. "I don't know how." "Support his chest with one hand, his bottom with the other. He's sturdier than he looks." With careful, reverent movements, Theo lifted his son for the first time. Oliver was warm and solid in his arms, heavier than he'd expected but perfectly sized to fit against his chest. The baby immediately grabbed onto Theo's tie, examining it with intense concentration. "He likes patterns," Scarlett observed. "Your tie has a geometric design." "Everything is geometric to him right now, isn't it?" Theo said, adjusting his hold as Oliver squirmed to get a better grip on the silk. "The whole world is new. Every day is a discovery. Scarlett's voice was soft, and when Theo looked at her, he saw something that might have been hope in her eyes. Yesterday he figured out how to clap. The day before he learned that if he drops his toy, someone will pick it up for him. Oliver chose that moment to release Theo's tie and pat his face with both hands, babbling what sounded almost like words. The contact was electric, soft baby palms against his cheeks, tiny fingers exploring his features with fearless curiosity. Da-da-da-da, Oliver said clearly, still patting Theo's face. The restaurant seemed to go silent around them. Theo felt his breath catch in his throat. Did he just... It's babbling, Scarlett said quickly. He says dada and mama, but he doesn't know what they mean yet. It's just sounds to him. But even as she said it, Oliver looked directly at Theo and repeated, da-da-da, with what seemed like intentional recognition. For the first time in 18 months, Theo Lancaster, billionaire, CEO, master of his own carefully controlled universe, felt like he was exactly where he belonged. 3 days later, Theo was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He normally would have ignored it, but something made him glance at the screen. The area code was local. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to the 12 executives seated around his conference table, stepping out into the hallway to take the call. "Mr. Lancaster, this is Dr. Martinez at Children's Hospital. I have Scarlett Hayes listed as Oliver Hayes Lancaster's mother, and you as his father. Is that correct?" Theo's blood turned to ice. "Yes. What's wrong? What happened?" Oliver was brought to the emergency room about an hour ago with a high fever and difficulty breathing. "We're running tests now, but I wanted to notify both parents immediately." The phone nearly slipped from Theo's hands. "Is he... How bad is it?" "We're taking excellent care of him, Mr. Lancaster. But you should come in as soon as possible." Theo was moving before he'd even hung up the phone, grabbing his jacket and car keys while barking instructions to his assistant about canceling the rest of his day. The drive to Children's Hospital passed in a blur of traffic lights and mounting panic. He found Scarlett in the pediatric emergency waiting room, curled in a plastic chair with tear-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. She looked smaller than he'd ever seen her, fragile and scared in a way that made his chest ache. "Scarlett," he was beside her in 2 strides, his hand automatically reaching for her shoulder. "What happened?" "He woke up from his nap burning up," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "His temperature was 104 and he was breathing so fast and he wouldn't stop crying, Theo. He's never cried like that." "Where is he now?" "They took him back for chest x-rays and blood work." "Doctor, Martinez thinks it might be pneumonia." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "He's so little, and he looked so scared when they took him away from me." Without thinking, Theo pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for just a moment before collapsing against his chest, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances he wasn't sure he believed himself. "He's going to be okay," he said fiercely. "He's strong, Scarlett. Look how strong he was when he grabbed my finger the other night." "You don't understand," she whispered against his shirt. "I've never been away from him when he was sick. He doesn't know these people, and they keep poking him with needles, and he just wants his mama." The raw pain in her voice broke something inside Theo. This was what single motherhood looked like, carrying the weight of every fear, every worry, every middle-of-the-night crisis completely alone. For 9 months, Scarlett had been the only person in the world who could comfort their son, and now even she couldn't make this better. "Mr. Lancaster? Ms. Hayes?" A woman in scrubs approached them. "I'm Dr. Martinez. You can see Oliver now." They followed her through a maze of corridors to a small room where Oliver lay in a crib that looked enormous around his small form. He was connected to several monitors, an IV line taped to his tiny hand, and an oxygen cannula under his nose. But his eyes were open, and when he saw Scarlett, he immediately reached for her with a weak cry. "Mama's here, baby," Scarlett whispered, carefully lifting him so as not to disturb his medical equipment. "Mama's here." Oliver settled immediately against her chest, his breathing still labored but his cries subsiding to soft whimpers. Theo watched, feeling utterly helpless and more terrified than he'd ever been in his life. "The good news is that it's not pneumonia," Dr. Martinez said, checking the monitors. "It appears to be a severe case of respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. Very common in babies his age, but it can be serious." "How serious?" Theo asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "In most cases, with proper treatment, babies recover completely, but Oliver's quite young and his fever is concerning. We want to keep him overnight for observation and IV fluids." "Overnight?" Scarlett's voice was small. I can stay with him, right? Of course. We have a fold-out chair that converts to a bed. Though I should warn you, it's not particularly comfortable. I don't care about comfortable, Scarlett said immediately. What about me? The words came out before Theo could stop them. Can I stay too? Dr. Martinez looked between them, clearly picking up on the complicated family dynamics. We typically only allow one parent to stay overnight, but given the circumstances, we can probably arrange something. After the doctor left, Scarlett settled into the chair beside Oliver's crib, still holding him against her chest. The baby's breathing was easier now, but he remained listless and feverish, nothing like the energetic child Theo had met 3 days ago. I should have brought him in sooner, Scarlett said, guilt evident in her voice. This morning he seemed fine, just a little congested. I thought it was just a cold. You couldn't have known, Theo said, pulling up another chair beside hers. You did everything right. Did I? I'm his mother, Theo. I'm supposed to protect him from everything, and I couldn't even protect him from getting sick. The anguish in her voice was raw and real, and Theo recognized it as the fear that lived at the heart of every parent, the terrible responsibility of loving someone so completely that their pain became your own. Look at me, he said gently, waiting until her green eyes met his. You are an incredible mother. Oliver is healthy and happy and loved because of you. This isn't your fault. She studied his face as if searching for something. When did you become so good at this? At what? Knowing what to say. Being here. She gestured helplessly. Being a partner. The word hit him like a physical blow. Partner. When they were married, he'd never been her partner. Not really. He'd been her husband in name, but he'd never shared the weight of their life together. Never stepped up when things got difficult. I'm learning, he said simply. Oliver stirred in Scarlett's arms, making soft, distressed sounds. She immediately began rocking gently, humming a lullaby under her breath, but the baby continued to fuss, his small face scrunched up with discomfort. Here, Theo said, surprising himself. Let me try. Scarlett hesitated for a moment, then carefully transferred Oliver to his arms. The baby felt warm and fragile, his breathing still too fast against Theo's chest. But instead of crying harder, Oliver turned his face toward Theo's shirt and settled with a soft sigh. He knows you, Scarlett said softly, echoing her words from the hotel room. Even feeling awful, he knows you're his daddy. Theo looked down at his son. The DNA results had confirmed it officially yesterday, and felt something shift permanently in his chest. This wasn't about proving himself anymore, or making amends for past mistakes. This was about love, pure and simple. Love for this small person who trusted him completely, and for the woman who had carried the burden of that love alone for too long. I want to help, he said quietly. Not just with this, with everything. I want to be here for the 3 a.m. feedings and the teething and the first steps and the skinned knees. I want to be the kind of father he deserves. Scarlett's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these seemed different, hopeful, rather than fearful. And what about us, she asked. What about you and me? Oliver chose that moment to grab onto Theo's shirt with one small fist, making a sound that might have been contentment. Outside the hospital room window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I don't know, Theo said honestly, but I know I want to find out. For the first time in 18 months, the silence between them felt like possibility rather than an ending. The hospital at night was a different world. The bright fluorescent lights had been dimmed to a soft amber glow, and the constant bustle of daytime had given way to the quiet efficiency of the night shift. Oliver had finally fallen into a restless sleep around 9 p.m., his small chest rising and falling with the effort of breathing through congested lungs. Theo had refused to leave. When visiting hours ended, he'd simply informed the nursing staff that he wasn't going anywhere, and something in his tone had discouraged argument. Now he sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair beside Scarlett's makeshift bed, watching over his family as they slept. Scarlett had fought exhaustion for hours, jerking awake every time Oliver made the smallest sound. But eventually, her body had surrendered to the emotional toll of the day, and she'd curled up on the narrow fold-out chair, with one hand still resting on Oliver's back through the crib rails. At midnight, Oliver's fever spiked again. Theo noticed the change immediately, the way the baby's breathing became more labored, the flush that spread across his pale cheeks. He pressed the call button before Oliver's distressed whimpers could wake Scarlett. His temperature's up to 103.8, the night nurse confirmed after checking the monitors. We'll give him some medication, but it's normal for fevers to spike at night with RSV. Is he going to be okay? Theo asked quietly, his eyes never leaving Oliver's face. He's responding well to treatment. The oxygen levels are stable and his hydration is improving. She adjusted the IV drip with practiced efficiency. Are you the father? Yes. First child? Theo felt a stab of guilt. Yes and no, it's complicated. The nurse, her name tag read Jennifer, gave him a knowing look. Hospital rooms have a way of uncomplicating things. Nothing matters except the little one getting better. She was right. Sitting here in the dark, watching Oliver fight through his illness, all the complex history between him and Scarlett seemed to fade into irrelevance. There was only this moment, this child, this overwhelming need to protect and heal. Around 2 a.m., Oliver woke crying, weak, miserable sobs that tore at Theo's heart. Scarlett stirred immediately, but Theo was already on his feet. I've got him, he whispered, carefully lifting Oliver from the crib. Go back to sleep. I should. Scarlett started to protest. You've been taking care of him alone for 9 months, Theo said gently. Let me take one night shift. Oliver's cries intensified at first, his small body rigid with distress. But Theo began walking slowly around the small room, swaying slightly the way he'd seen Scarlett do, and gradually the baby's sobs subsided into hiccuping whimpers. It's okay, buddy, Theo murmured against Oliver's hair. Daddy's here. I know you don't feel good, but you're going to get better. I promise. The words felt strange and wonderful in his mouth. Daddy. He was somebody's daddy now, and that tiny person was depending on him to make everything better. Oliver's fever-bright eyes focused on Theo's face with serious concentration, as if trying to understand who this man was and why he felt so safe in his arms. Slowly, his small fist uncurled and came to rest against Theo's chest, right over his heart. That's right, Theo whispered. Just rest. I've got you. From the fold-out bed, he heard Scarlett's soft voice. You're a natural at this. He looked over to find her awake, watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. I don't feel natural. I feel terrified. Good. That means you care. She sat up, pushing her hair back from her face. The first few months I was convinced I was going to break him somehow. Every little sound he made I thought it meant something was wrong. How did you do it? Theo asked, still swaying gently as Oliver's breathing began to even out. All those nights alone, all those fears? I figured it out as I went along. What else could I do? Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Theo heard the underlying strength in it. When it's just you and him, you don't have the luxury of falling apart. Oliver made a soft sound and turned his face more fully against Theo's chest, seeking comfort. The gesture was so trusting, so completely vulnerable, that Theo felt his throat tighten with emotion. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for not being here, for not being the kind of man you could trust with this. Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. You're here now. Is that enough? Can it be enough? I don't know yet, she said honestly. But watching you with him tonight, it's a start. They fell into comfortable silence, the only sounds Oliver's slightly congested breathing and the soft beeping of monitors. Theo continued his slow circuit of the room, and gradually he felt Oliver's body relax completely against him. The baby's breathing deepened, and his small hand unclenched from Theo's shirt. He's asleep, Scarlett observed. Should I put him back in the crib? Not yet. Sometimes when they're sick like this, they sleep better being held. The warmth and heartbeat are comforting. So Theo kept walking, kept swaying, kept whispering soft reassurances to his sleeping son. Outside the window, the city sparkled in the darkness. But inside the small hospital room, his entire world had contracted to the weight of 9 months of love in his arms. Theo? Scarlett's voice was drowsy. Yeah? When I was in labor with him, I kept thinking about you, wondering if you would have wanted to be there, if you would have held my hand through the contractions. The admission hit him like a physical blow. I would have, he said fiercely. I would have moved heaven and earth to be there. I know that now. She shifted on the narrow bed, trying to get comfortable. I was so angry for so long, but watching you tonight, I think maybe I was wrong about some things. What things? I thought you didn't want a family because you didn't want the complications, but maybe you just didn't know how to want one. Oliver stirred slightly in his arms, making soft baby sounds before settling again. Theo adjusted his hold, marveling at how perfectly his son fit against his chest. My father was never around when I was sick, Theo said quietly. Business trips, important meetings. My mother would sit with me sometimes, but mostly it was nannies. I swore I'd be different, but I never thought I'd get the chance to prove it. You're proving it now. One night doesn't make me a good father. No, Scarlett agreed, but it's a beginning, and beginnings matter. As dawn approached, Oliver's fever finally broke. Theo felt the change immediately, the way the baby's skin cooled against his chest, the way his breathing eased. When Dr. Martinez arrived for morning rounds, she confirmed what they already knew. The crisis had passed. He can go home this afternoon, she announced after examining Oliver thoroughly. Continue the medications for a few more days, lots of fluids, and follow up with his regular pediatrician early next week. Home. Theo realized with a start that he didn't know where home was for Oliver and Scarlett. The hotel room had just been temporary, and he'd never asked where they'd been living for the past 18 months. Where will you take him? He asked as they gathered Oliver's things. Scarlett paused, enfolding the baby's clothes. I have an apartment across town. It's small, but it's ours. I'd like to see it, Theo said. I'd like to see where he lives. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. Okay, you can follow us home. Home. The word had a different meaning now, and as Theo watched Scarlett carefully buckle Oliver into his car seat, he realized that home wasn't a place anymore. Home was wherever his family was. Scarlett's apartment was nothing like what Theo had expected. Tucked into a tree-lined neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown, the small 2-bedroom unit was warm and inviting in ways his sterile penthouse had never been. Every corner showed evidence of a life lived with love and intention. Framed photos of Oliver at various stages, children's books stacked on shelves, toys organized in colorful baskets. It's not much, Scarlett said, settling Oliver into his playpen with practiced ease. The baby was still recovering, content to sit quietly with his favorite stuffed elephant, but his color was much better, and his breathing had returned to normal. It's perfect, Theo said, and meant it. The living room walls were painted a soft sage green, and afternoon sunlight streamed through sheer curtains, making everything glow with warmth. It feels like a home. I wanted Oliver to have stability, somewhere that was just ours. Scarlett moved to the kitchen, which was separated from the living room by a breakfast bar. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? That would be great. Theo wandered around the living room while she prepared coffee, taking in the details of their life. A growth chart marked with careful measurements hung on the wall next to the kitchen. Photos chronicled Oliver's first 9 months, his first smile, sitting up alone, attempting to crawl. In every picture, Scarlett looked radiant despite the exhaustion that Theo now recognized as the constant companion of new motherhood. He loves that elephant, Scarlett said, nodding toward Oliver, who was now chewing contentedly on the toy's ear. It was the first thing I bought him when I found out I was pregnant. I used to hold it against my stomach and talk to him. What did you tell him? Everything. How excited I was to meet him. How much I already loved him. She handed Theo a mug of coffee. How sorry I was that his daddy didn't know about him yet. The casual mention of those early days hit Theo harder than he'd expected. While he'd been focused on quarterly reports and board meetings, Scarlett had been building a relationship with their unborn child, preparing for motherhood completely alone. I wish you had told me, he said quietly. I tried to, in my own way. Do you remember the dinner where I said I had something important to discuss with you? Theo's memory stirred uncomfortably. That was the night the Jakarta deal fell through. I had to leave early for a conference call. I was going to tell you then. I'd been practicing what to say for days. Scarlett's smile was sad. But when you left without even asking what I'd wanted to talk about, I realized that whatever was happening at your office would always be more important than anything happening in our marriage. That's not, Theo started, then stopped. Because it was true. He'd prioritized work over everything else, including the woman he'd claimed to love. Before he could respond, there was a sharp knock at the apartment door. Scarlett frowned, glancing at the clock. I'm not expecting anyone, she said, moving toward the door. And my neighbors usually just call first. She checked the peephole and went very still. Oh no. What is it? It's someone from your world. Scarlett turned back to him, her face pale. Victoria Ashwood. She says she's here about you. Theo's blood ran cold. Victoria Ashwood was his business partner's wife, a woman who made collecting and trading gossip her primary occupation. If she was here, it meant word of Oliver's existence had already begun to spread through their social circle. Don't answer it, he said immediately. I can't just ignore her. She saw me through the window. Scarlett looked panicked. What does she want? Another knock, more insistent this time. Scarlett, darling, I know you're in there. We need to chat. Theo moved to stand beside Scarlett, his mind racing through possibilities. Let me handle this. No. If she sees you here with Oliver, it'll be all over the society pages by tomorrow. Scarlett straightened her shoulders, that familiar stubborn tilt to her chin appearing. I can deal with this. Before Theo could protest, she opened the door. Victoria Ashwood swept into the apartment like a force of nature, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer outfit completely out of place in the cozy space. Her sharp blue eyes immediately zeroed in on Oliver, who looked up from his playpen with curious interest. Well, well, Victoria purred, her gaze moving from the baby to Scarlett to Theo, who had stepped out from behind the door. Isn't this an interesting little family reunion? Victoria, Theo said coolly. What are you doing here? Oh, don't be so formal, darling. I was simply dying to meet my dear friend's secret baby. Victoria's smile was predatory, though I must say the resemblance is quite unmistakable. Those Lancaster eyes are practically a family trademark. Oliver, sensing the tension in the room, made a small fussing sound. Scarlett immediately moved to him, lifting him protectively against her chest. What do you want? Scarlett asked directly. Want? Oh, sweetheart, I don't want anything. I'm simply here as a friend to offer some advice. Victoria perched on the edge of the sofa without being invited. You see, word is already beginning to circulate about Theo's mysterious disappearance from David Morrison's wedding. Several people noticed him following you outside, and then neither of you returned to the reception. That's hardly scandalous, Theo said. No, but it becomes much more interesting when you add in the photos. Theo felt his stomach drop. What photos? Victoria pulled out her phone with theatrical flair. A lovely shot of you two in the garden, and another of you leaving the hotel parking lot at 3 a.m. Someone was quite diligent with their camera work. She held up the phone, showing a clear image of Theo and Scarlett standing by the fountain, Oliver visible in Scarlett's arms. Even in the dim lighting, the baby's resemblance to Theo was obvious. Who took these? Scarlett demanded. Does it matter? The point is, they exist. And in about 6 hours, they're going to be the lead story on page 6 unless we come to some sort of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Theo's voice was dangerously quiet. Nothing dramatic, a simple exclusive interview. Billionaire CEO reunites with secret baby. Very heartwarming, very sympathetic. Much better than letting them write their own story based on speculation and gossip. Oliver began to cry, picking up on the tension radiating from both his parents. Scarlett bounced him gently, but her eyes never left Victoria's face. And if we refuse? Scarlett asked. Oh, darling, you don't want to refuse. Without your cooperation, the story becomes much less flattering. Ruthless CEO abandons pregnant wife has such an ugly ring to it, don't you think? Theo stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. Get out. Now, there's no need for hostility. I'm offering you a chance to control the narrative. I said get out. Theo's voice was deadly calm, the same tone he used in boardrooms when someone had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. And if those photos see the light of day, I'll make sure you and your husband never work in this city again. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. You're making a mistake, Theo. This story is coming out whether you cooperate or not. At least this way, you get to be the heroes instead of the villains. She stood, smoothing her skirt with elaborate calm. I'll give you until tomorrow morning to reconsider. Think about what's best for that beautiful baby. Think about what kind of world you want him growing up in. After she left, the apartment felt poisoned by her presence. Oliver continued to cry, and Scarlett looked close to tears herself. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want him exposed to this world, to people like her. Theo reached for Oliver, and this time Scarlett didn't hesitate to hand him over. The baby settled immediately against his father's chest, his cries subsiding to soft hiccups. She can't hurt us, Theo said firmly. I won't let her. You can't control the media, Theo. Once this gets out, our lives will never be private again. Oliver will grow up with photographers following him, with people judging every choice we make. Theo looked down at his son's peaceful face, then back at Scarlett's frightened green eyes. In the space of a few hours, he'd gone from learning to be a father to having to protect his family from the very world that had made him successful. Then we don't give them anything to photograph, he said quietly. What do you mean? I mean we disappear. Tonight, before those photos can be published. Scarlett stared at him. Disappear where? I have a house, completely private, totally secure. We can go there while I figure out how to handle this. Theo, I can't just uproot our entire life because of some gossip columnist. You're not uprooting your life, Theo said, his voice gentle but determined. You're protecting it. You're protecting him. Oliver chose that moment to reach up and pat Theo's cheek, babbling softly. The gesture was so trusting, so innocent, that it broke Theo's heart to think of photographers capturing moments like this for public consumption. How long? Scarlett asked quietly. However long it takes, I promise you I will fix this, but right now I need to get you both somewhere safe. Outside, a car door slammed, and they both froze. Through the window, they could see a van with a news station logo pulling up to the curb. Too late, Scarlett whispered. Theo handed Oliver back to her and pulled out his phone. Pack whatever you need for a few days. I'm calling my security team. Theo, trust me, he said, meeting her eyes. Please, let me protect you this time. For a moment, Scarlett looked like she might argue. Then she nodded, clutching Oliver closer to her chest. Okay, she said, but this doesn't change anything between us. This is just about keeping Oliver safe. I understand, Theo said, though even as he made the call to his security team, he wondered if that was entirely true. The lake house was nothing like Theo's sterile penthouse. Nestled on the shores of Lake Tahoe, 3 hours from the city, it was a place he'd bought years ago but rarely visited. Too busy, too many obligations, too many excuses. Now, as he carried Oliver's car seat up the wooden steps while Scarlett juggled diaper bags and supplies, he wondered why he'd ever stayed away. The house was warm and welcoming, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and a stone fireplace that dominated the living room. Theo's housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had prepared everything on short notice. Fresh groceries, clean linens, and even a temporary crib set up in the master bedroom. This is beautiful, Scarlett said softly, setting Oliver down in his carrier so she could look around. The baby was fascinated by the view, his gray eyes wide as he took in the sparkling water and pine trees visible through the windows. I'd forgotten how peaceful it is here, Theo admitted, watching Oliver babble at a pair of ducks swimming past the dock. No paparazzi, no society pages, no Victoria Ashwood. The escape from the city had been swift and efficient. Theo's security team had created a diversion while they slipped out the back of Scarlett's apartment building, and within 2 hours they were safely away from the media circus that was undoubtedly brewing. Your phone's been buzzing nonstop, Scarlett observed as Theo's device vibrated for the dozenth time in 10 minutes. Damage control, he said, glancing at the screen. My publicist, my lawyer, my business partner. Everyone wants to know how to handle the story. And what are you going to tell them? The truth, that I have a son, and anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell. Scarlett looked surprised by his vehemence. Just like that? You're not worried about your image, your business relationships? I spent 18 months worried about maintaining the perfect image, Theo said, lifting Oliver from his carrier and settling with him on the large sofa. And where did it get me? I missed my son's birth, his first smile, his first laugh. I almost missed his first word. I'm done prioritizing what other people think over what actually matters. Oliver reached for the throw pillow beside them, his small fingers exploring the textured fabric with intense concentration. Theo watched, marveling at how everything was still new and fascinating to his son. What was his first word? Theo asked. Really? Mama, Scarlett said with a soft smile. At 7 months, he said it clear as day while I was making dinner and I started crying right there in the kitchen. I'm sorry I missed it. You're here for what comes next, she said quietly. That's what matters. They settled into an easy routine over the next few hours. Scarlett gave Oliver a bath in the large master bathroom sink, while Theo watched, asking questions about everything. How warm should the water be? Why did babies need special soap? Was it normal for Oliver to splash so enthusiastically that water ended up everywhere? He loves bath time, Scarlett explained, laughing as Oliver slapped the water with both hands, soaking the front of her shirt. It's one of his favorite parts of the day. Can I try? Theo asked hesitantly. Of course. Just support his back and neck and don't worry if he splashes. It means he's happy. Theo's hands shook slightly as he took over, but Oliver seemed completely comfortable with the transition. In fact, he seemed delighted to have a new audience for his water acrobatics, grinning widely as he sent droplets flying in every direction. Look at that smile, Theo breathed, completely enchanted. He's showing off for me. He's a little performer, Scarlett agreed. Yesterday he figured out how to blow raspberries, and now he does it constantly because he likes the way adults react. As if on cue, Oliver pursed his tiny lips and blew, sending bubbles and water droplets everywhere. Theo laughed. a genuine surprised sound that seemed to delight the baby even more. After bath time, they moved to the living room for Oliver's bedtime routine. Scarlett had packed his favorite books, and Theo found himself reading Goodnight Moon, while Oliver sat in his lap, turning pages with clumsy enthusiasm. "He knows this book by heart," Scarlett said from her spot on the opposite end of the sofa. "Watch his face when you get to the part about the mittens." Sure enough, when Theo read, "and a pair of mittens," Oliver clapped his hands together and babbled excitedly, clearly anticipating the familiar words. "He's brilliant," Theo said, amazed. "All babies his age do that. They love repetition and predictability. No, he's definitely brilliant. Look at the way he's studying the pictures." Scarlett's expression grew soft as she watched them together. "You're going to be one of those fathers who thinks everything their child does is extraordinary, isn't it?" Theo looked genuinely confused. "I mean, 9 months ago he didn't exist, and now he's sitting here turning pages and responding to stories. How is that not extraordinary?" The wonder in his voice made Scarlett's chest tight with emotion. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who could find magic in the everyday, who approached new experiences with curiosity rather than calculation. Oliver's eyelids began to droop as the story continued, and by the time they reached goodnight noises everywhere, he was fast asleep against Theo's chest. "Should I put him in the crib?" Theo whispered. "In a few minutes. He likes to be held for a little while after he falls asleep. Something about the heartbeat and breathing, it keeps him calm." So they sat in comfortable silence, Oliver sleeping peacefully between them, while the lake lapped gently against the shore outside. The only sounds were the soft crackle of the fire Theo had built, and the occasional sleepy sigh from their son. "This feels surreal," Scarlett said quietly. "Yesterday morning I was a single mother worried about making rent, and now I'm hiding from paparazzi in a house that probably costs more than I make in 5 years. You don't have to worry about making rent anymore," Theo said carefully. "I want to help support you both. I told you, I don't want your money. It's not about what you want. It's about what Oliver needs. And what he needs is security and stability." Scarlett was quiet for a moment, considering. What happens when this media storm dies down? What happens when we go back to the real world? "I don't know," Theo admitted. "But I know I don't want to go back to the way things were. I don't want to be the kind of father who sees his son on weekends and holidays. I want to be part of his everyday life. And what about us? What about you and me?" The question hung in the air between them. Oliver stirred slightly in his sleep, one small hand curling around Theo's shirt. "I know I don't deserve another chance," Theo said slowly. "I know I failed you as a husband, and I know trust doesn't come back overnight. But I also know that sitting here with you and Oliver feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been." Scarlett studied his face in the firelight. "You hurt me, Theo. Deeply. When I left, I truly believed you'd be relieved not to have to deal with me anymore. I was an idiot. A selfish workaholic idiot who took the best thing in his life for granted." "You were," she agreed quietly. "But watching you with Oliver these past few days, maybe people can change. I want to try. I want to be the man you needed me to be 2 years ago." Oliver made a soft sleeping sound, and they both looked down at him automatically, their parental instincts already perfectly synchronized. "What if we take it slow?" Scarlett said eventually. "What if we see if we can be good co-parents first and worry about the rest later?" "I'll take whatever you're willing to give me," Theo said honestly. "Even if it means living in the same space for a while, being around each other every day." Theo's heart jumped. "You'd consider that?" "I'd consider a lot of things I wouldn't have considered a week ago." Scarlett reached over and gently touched Oliver's hair. "He needs his father. And maybe I need to see who you've become." Outside, a loon called across the water, its haunting song echoing in the darkness. Inside the warm circle of lamplight, 3 people who were learning to be a family sat together, and for the first time in 18 months, the future felt full of possibility, rather than regret. But even as they talked about taking things slow, neither of them noticed the way their hands had somehow found each other on the sofa cushion between them, fingers intertwined as naturally as if no time had passed at all. 3 days at the lake house had felt like a different lifetime. Theo had discovered the simple joy of morning feedings, the satisfaction of making Oliver laugh with silly faces, and the profound peace of watching his son sleep. For the first time in years, he'd slept past 6 a.m., woken without immediately checking his phone, and spent entire hours focused on nothing but the present moment. Scarlett had begun to relax around him, the defensive walls she'd built slowly coming down as she watched him embrace fatherhood with genuine enthusiasm. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, taking turns with Oliver's care, cooking simple meals together, talking late into the night after the baby was asleep. But on Thursday morning, their peaceful bubble burst. Theo's phone rang at 7 a.m. with a call from his lawyer, Harrison Mitchell. The urgency in Harrison's voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. "Theo, we have a problem. A big one." "What kind of problem?" Theo stepped out onto the deck, not wanting to wake Scarlett and Oliver. Victoria Ashwood didn't just threaten to publish those photos. She published them 3 days ago, along with a story that's, well, it's brutal. And now someone else has come forward. Theo's blood turned to ice. Who? Natasha Volkov. The name hit Theo like a physical blow. Natasha, his ex-girlfriend from college. A relationship that had ended badly when she'd wanted marriage and he'd wanted freedom. He hadn't thought about her in years. What does Natasha have to do with anything? She's claiming you had an affair with her while you were married to Scarlett. Says she has photos, emails, hotel receipts. She's painting a picture of you as a serial cheater who abandoned his pregnant wife for other women. That's insane. I never cheated on Scarlett. I haven't spoken to Natasha since college. I believe you, but the evidence she's presenting looks convincing. Someone's gone to a lot of trouble to make this story stick. Theo's mind raced. The photos could be doctored, the emails fabricated. But why would Natasha do this? What did she have to gain? There's more. Harrison continued grimly. The story's gone viral. It's been picked up by every major news outlet. Your stock price dropped 15% yesterday, and the board is calling an emergency meeting. Through the windows, Theo could see Scarlett moving around the kitchen, preparing Oliver's breakfast. She looked relaxed and happy, humming softly as she warmed his bottle. The sight made his chest ache with the knowledge that he was about to destroy the fragile peace they'd built. How bad is it? He asked quietly. Bad. The narrative is that you're an entitled billionaire who uses women and discards them. They're calling Scarlett a victim and Oliver a casualty of your selfishness. There's even speculation about your fitness as a father. My fitness as a father? Theo's voice was dangerous. Based on what? Based on the fact that you abandoned a pregnant wife and have only recently discovered your son. They're questioning whether someone with your apparent moral failings should have custody rights. The words hit Theo like a physical attack. In less than a week, he'd gone from not knowing he had a son to being told he might not deserve one. What do? We fight. But Theo, this is going to get ugly. They're going to dig into every aspect of your life, your marriage, your business dealings, and they're going to go after Scarlett too. What do you mean, go after Scarlett? They're already questioning why she hid the pregnancy, whether she's a gold digger trying to trap a rich man, whether she's a fit mother. One outlet is running a piece called The Baby Trap, how a desperate ex-wife tried to destroy a billionaire. Theo felt sick. This was exactly what Scarlett had feared, being dragged into his world, having their private lives dissected for public entertainment. And now Oliver was part of it too, an innocent child whose existence was being treated like a scandal. I need to see the stories, Theo said. I'll send you links, but Theo, maybe don't show Scarlett yet. Let's figure out our strategy first. But it was too late. Through the window, Theo saw Scarlett looking at her phone, her face going progressively paler as she scrolled. She looked up and met his eyes through the glass, and he saw the exact moment her heart broke. She's already seen them, Theo said quietly. I have to go. He ended the call and rushed back inside, but Scarlett was already moving, packing Oliver's things with swift, mechanical efficiency. The baby sat in his high chair, babbling happily and completely unaware that his world was being turned upside down. Scarlett, don't. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Just don't. Whatever you've read, we can fix this. Harrison says, fix this? She whirled around, her green eyes blazing with fury and pain. Theo, they're calling me a gold digger who trapped you with a baby. They're saying I'm an unfit mother who hid my pregnancy out of spite. They have quotes from anonymous sources saying I was jealous and vindictive during our marriage. None of that is true. It doesn't matter if it's true. It's out there now, forever. Oliver is going to grow up seeing articles about how his mother was a manipulative woman who tried to destroy his father's life. Theo reached for her, but she stepped back, clutching Oliver's stuffed elephant like a shield. And you, she continued, her voice breaking. They're saying you cheated on me, that you never wanted a family, that you're fighting for custody not because you love Oliver, but because you don't want to pay child support. You know that's not true. You've seen me with him these past few days. Have I? Or did I see what you wanted me to see? The accusation hung in the air between them like poison. How do I know this whole thing isn't some elaborate performance? How do I know you're not just trying to control the narrative? The question cut deeper than any blade. After everything they'd shared, all the tender moments and growing trust, she still doubted his motives. Because I love him, Theo said fiercely. Because I love you. Because for the first time in my life I understand what it means to have something worth fighting for. Scarlett stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You love me? Now? After 18 months of silence, after all of this chaos? Now you say you love me? I never stopped loving you. I was just too stupid and proud to fight for you when it mattered. Oliver began to cry, sensing the tension in the room. Scarlett immediately went to him, lifting him from his high chair and holding him against her chest. The sight of them together, his whole world, the family he'd just found, made Theo's chest ache with desperate fear. I'm taking Oliver and going home, Scarlett said quietly. This is your home. We're your family. No, Theo. This was a fantasy. A beautiful, impossible fantasy where we could pretend the outside world didn't exist. She gestured toward her phone, which was still buzzing with notifications. But it does exist. And I won't let my son grow up in the middle of this circus. Running away won't make it stop. Maybe not. But staying here, pretending we can be a happy family while the world tears us apart, that will definitely destroy us. She kissed Oliver's head, breathing in his baby scent like she was trying to memorize it. I need to protect him. That's my job as his mother. It's my job too, as his father. Then prove it. Fix this mess you've dragged us into. Clear your name, clear mine, and make it safe for Oliver to have you in his life. She moved toward the bedroom to finish packing. But do it from a distance. I can't watch you destroy yourself trying to save a reputation that might not be worth saving. Theo followed her, desperation making his voice rough. Scarlett, please, don't do this. Don't take him away from me again. She paused in the doorway, not turning around. I'm not taking him away from you. I'm protecting him until you figure out how to be his father without destroying his life in the process. And us? What about us? Finally, she turned back to face him, and the look in her eyes was goodbye. There is no us, Theo. There's just a son who needs his father to be better than this. Better than the man who let his world become so toxic that his own family isn't safe in it. 2 hours later, Theo stood on the empty dock watching the wake from Scarlett's boat disappear across the lake. Oliver's laughter still seemed to echo in the silence, and the house behind him felt like a mausoleum of broken dreams. His phone buzzed with another call from Harrison, another crisis to manage, another fire to put out. But for the first time in his life, Theo Lancaster, master of his universe, destroyer of obstacles, had no idea how to fight an enemy that lived in whispers and headlines in the court of public opinion. He had lost his family twice now. He would not lose them a third time. 2 weeks after Scarlett left the lake house, Theo had become a man possessed. He'd barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination while his team of investigators, lawyers, and public relations experts worked around the clock to uncover the truth behind Natasha Volkov's accusations. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. We found it, Harrison said, bursting into Theo's office with a laptop and a triumphant expression. The smoking gun, Marcus Webb, Theo's head of security, was right behind him. It's bigger than we thought, Theo. This wasn't just about destroying your reputation. This was about destroying your company. Theo looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Show me. Harrison set the laptop on Theo's desk and pulled up a series of bank records. Natasha Volkov received 2 payments in the past month, $50,000 each. Guess where they came from? Tell me. Phoenix Industries, your biggest competitor. The company that's been trying to buy out your cybersecurity contracts for years. Theo felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. They paid her to lie about me. It gets better, Marcus added, pulling up another screen. We found the original photos she used to create the fake evidence. They're from a corporate event in college. You're in some of them, but you're clearly in group shots with dozens of other people. She had them digitally altered to make it look like you were alone together. The emails, all fabricated. We found the software she used to create fake email headers and timestamps. She's not very good at covering her tracks. What about Victoria Ashwood? Also on Phoenix Industries' payroll. Has been for 6 months. They've been feeding her information about your business dealings, trying to find any way to damage your reputation. Theo leaned back in his chair, the pieces finally falling into place. They knew if they could make me look like an unreliable person, a cheater, an unfit father, They could destabilize the company enough to force a buyout. Exactly. And they almost succeeded. Your stock is still down 12% and 3 major clients have put their contracts under review. But we have proof now. Real proof. We have enough to destroy both of them. Harrison confirmed. The question is, what do you want to do with it? For the first time in 2 weeks, Theo smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. I want to call a press conference. 3 hours later, Theo stood behind a podium in the ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, facing a room packed with reporters, cameras, and the very people who had been tearing his life apart for weeks. He wore his best suit, his hair was perfectly styled, and his expression was the calm, controlled mask he'd perfected in boardrooms around the world. But inside, he was thinking of Oliver's laugh and Scarlett's tears and the family he'd lost twice because of lies and manipulation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. 2 weeks ago, my life was turned upside down by accusations that painted me as an unfaithful husband, an unfit father. Today I'm here to set the record straight. The room erupted with questions, but Theo held up a hand for silence. "I will take questions after I've said what I came here to say. But first, I need you to understand something about the woman you've been calling a gold digger and a manipulator. Scarlett Hayes is the strongest, most honorable person I know. She raised our son alone for 9 months not because she wanted to trap me or hurt me, but because I had shown her that I wasn't capable of being the partner and father they deserved." He paused, letting that sink in. The failure of our marriage wasn't her fault, it was mine. I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot to build a life. I was so concerned with appearing successful that I became a terrible husband, and when she needed me most, I wasn't there. In the crowd he spotted Victoria Ashwood, her face pale and furious. Good, let her sweat. But this press conference isn't about my personal failings. It's about the systematic campaign of lies that has been orchestrated against my family by people who wanted to destroy my company and my reputation. Harrison stepped forward and handed Theo a folder. Natasha Volkov, the woman who accused me of having an affair with her during my marriage, was paid $100,000 by Phoenix Industries to fabricate evidence against me. The photographs she provided were digitally altered. The emails were created using software designed to produce fake evidence. The hotel receipts were forged. The room exploded with noise. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, the sound of frantic typing as the story shifted in real time. Furthermore, Theo continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, Victoria Ashwood, the society reporter who broke this story, has been on Phoenix Industries' payroll for 6 months, feeding them inside information about my business and personal life in an attempt to find ammunition to use against me. He held up a stack of documents. I have bank records, digital forensics reports, and signed confessions from the people Phoenix Industries hired to create this false narrative. All of this evidence will be made available to law enforcement, and both Ms. Volkov and Ms. Ashwood will be facing charges for fraud, extortion, and defamation. Victoria Ashwood was pushing through the crowd toward the exit, but Marcus Webb and 2 security guards were already moving to intercept her. But most importantly, Theo said, his voice softening as he reached the part that mattered most, I want to address my son, Oliver, who will someday be old enough to read these stories and wonder what kind of man his father really is. He looked directly into the cameras, imagining Scarlett watching somewhere, holding Oliver in her arms. Oliver, your father is not perfect. He has made terrible mistakes, and he has hurt people he loves through his own selfishness and pride. But he has never been unfaithful to your mother, and he has never stopped loving either of you, even when he was too stupid to show it properly. His voice cracked slightly, the careful control slipping for just a moment. Your mother is a hero. She protected you when I couldn't, loved you when I didn't know you existed, and kept you safe when the world became too dangerous. Everything good about you comes from her courage and her strength. The room had gone completely quiet, the usually cynical reporters caught up in the raw emotion of his words. And to Scarlett, Theo continued, his eyes still on the cameras, I know I have no right to ask for another chance. I know trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself. But I also know that what we built in those 3 days at the lake was real. The way Oliver laughed when I read to him was real. The way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching was real. He took a breath, gathering himself for the most important words he'd ever spoken. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I'm not asking you to forget 18 months of pain and disappointment. I'm asking you to let me prove that the man you fell in love with is still here, buried underneath all the fear and ambition and stupidity. I'm asking you to let me be the father Oliver deserves and the partner you needed me to be years ago." He stepped back from the podium. "I'll take a few questions now, but I want to be clear. My priority is rebuilding my family, not managing my image. The truth speaks for itself." The questions came fast and hard, but Theo answered them all with the same calm precision. Yes, he was pursuing charges against Phoenix Industries. Yes, he was suing for damages. No, he wouldn't be stepping down as CEO. And yes, he hoped that someday his family would be willing to give him another chance. After the press conference, Harrison found him in a quiet corridor outside the ballroom. "That was either brilliant or career suicide," Harrison said. "Admitting your personal failings in front of the entire world isn't typically how we handle these situations." "I don't care about typical," Theo replied, checking his phone for the 100th time, hoping for a text from Scarlett that hadn't come. "I care about the truth." "Well, the truth is already trending on social media. Theo Lancaster Truth is the #1 hashtag, and early responses are overwhelmingly supportive. It seems people appreciate honesty more than we expected." But Theo barely heard him, because standing at the end of the corridor, holding Oliver in her arms, was Scarlett. She looked tired and beautiful and cautious, her green eyes studying his face as if trying to solve a puzzle. Oliver, meanwhile, was reaching toward Theo with obvious recognition and delight. Da-da-da-da, Oliver babbled excitedly, squirming in his mother's arms. "I watched the press conference," Scarlett said quietly as Theo approached. "You didn't have to do that. Expose yourself like that." "Yes, I did. I had to tell the truth. About everything." He stopped just out of reach, not daring to hope. "Does this mean you're willing to talk?" "It means I'm willing to listen." She shifted Oliver to her other hip. "But Theo, public apologies and grand gestures, they're just words. It's what you do next that matters." "Then let me show you," he said simply. "Let me show you both. Every day for as long as it takes." Oliver made an impatient sound and lunged toward his father with such enthusiasm that Scarlett had to take a step forward to keep from dropping him. Theo's arms came up automatically, and suddenly he was holding his son again, breathing in that perfect baby smell and feeling the missing piece of his soul click back into place. "He missed you," Scarlett said softly, watching as Oliver immediately settled against Theo's chest with a contented sigh. "I missed him too. I missed both of you." Theo looked at her over their son's head. "Can we try again? Really try this time?" Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Then she reached out and touched Oliver's back where he lay against his father's chest. "We'll take it one day at a time," she said finally. "No promises, no expectations. Just see what happens." It wasn't everything Theo had hoped for, but it was enough. It was a beginning. And as they walked out of the hotel together, a family, still fragile but no longer broken, Theo realized that sometimes the greatest victory wasn't about conquering your enemies. Sometimes it was about having the courage to surrender to love. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of the house in Marin County, casting golden light across the breakfast table where chaos reigned supreme. Oliver, now nearly 3 years old, was engaged in what appeared to be an epic battle between his scrambled eggs and his dinosaur-shaped toast, complete with sound effects that would have impressed any Hollywood sound engineer. "Roar! The T-Rex is going to eat the eggs," Oliver announced, wielding his fork like a tiny weapon while making his toast stomp across his plate. "The T-Rex needs to eat the eggs so he can grow big and strong," Theo said solemnly from his position at the stove, where he was flipping pancakes with the focused intensity he used to reserve for board meetings. "Otherwise, he'll be a very small, very hungry dinosaur." "Daddy, dinosaurs don't eat eggs for breakfast," Oliver informed him with the absolute certainty that only toddlers possessed. "They eat, dinosaur food." "And what exactly is dinosaur food?" Scarlett asked, entering the kitchen with her hair still damp from her shower and wearing the paint-splattered jeans that meant she was planning to work in her studio today. "Cookies," Oliver declared triumphantly. "And ice cream, and chocolate." "Well, that explains why all the dinosaurs died out," Theo said seriously, transferring perfectly golden pancakes to a plate. "Too much sugar, not enough vegetables." Oliver considered this with the gravity of a philosopher contemplating the meaning of life. Then he dutifully took a bite of his eggs. Scarlett kissed the top of Oliver's head, then moved to the coffee maker, her daily ritual that Theo had learned to respect and protect. She wasn't fully human until that first cup, a fact that had taken him embarrassingly long to understand during their marriage, but which he now guarded like a sacred truth. "Sleep okay?" she asked as Theo handed her a steaming mug prepared exactly the way she liked it. 1 sugar, splash of cream, stirred counterclockwise because Oliver had declared that was the magic way, and somehow it had stuck. Better than okay, Theo replied, his voice soft with contentment. I love Saturday mornings. It had taken them 18 months to get here, to this easy domestic rhythm, to Saturday mornings that felt like gifts rather than obligations. The path back to each other hadn't been smooth or quick. There had been couples therapy sessions where they'd both cried, family therapy sessions where they'd learned to communicate without defensiveness, and countless conversations late into the night after Oliver was asleep. Theo had moved out of his sterile penthouse and into a guest house on the property they'd bought together 6 months ago, close enough to be part of Oliver's daily life, far enough away that Scarlett had space to trust him gradually. He'd restructured his entire company, promoting trusted lieutenants and building in redundancies so that he was never again the single point of failure that kept him from his family. Mama, can we go to the park today? Oliver asked, having apparently reached a peace treaty with his breakfast. I want to show the ducks my new truck. After you finish eating and we clean up, Scarlett said, settling into her chair beside him. And after Daddy finishes his pancakes. Daddy makes good pancakes, Oliver announced as if this was breaking news. Better than the restaurant ones. That's because Daddy practices a lot, Theo said, joining them at the table with his own plate. Remember what we learned about practicing? Practice makes, Oliver screwed up his face in concentration. Perfect? Scarlett suggested. Practice makes perfect. Oliver cheered, then immediately began dismantling his pancakes to build what appeared to be a fortress. Like when Daddy practiced reading stories and now he does all the voices. Theo caught Scarlett's eye across the table and she smiled. One of those soft, surprised smiles that still had the power to stop his heart. He'd been practicing a lot more than bedtime stories. He'd been practicing patience, practicing presence, practicing the art of putting his family first not just when it was convenient but when it was hard. Speaking of practice, Scarlett said, her tone carefully casual, I have something to tell you both. Something in her voice made Theo look up sharply. Oliver, oblivious to any undercurrents, continued his architectural endeavors with his breakfast. What is it? Theo asked. Scarlett's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach and Theo's breath caught. She'd been tired lately, sleeping more than usual, and there had been morning sickness that she'd attributed to a stomach bug. I'm pregnant, she said quietly, her green eyes searching his face for his reaction. The kitchen went completely silent except for Oliver's humming as he continued to play with his food. Theo felt the world tilt on its axis in the best possible way. Pregnant, he repeated, as if testing the word. About 8 weeks, according to the doctor. I found out yesterday. Scarlett's voice was steady, but he could see the vulnerability in her eyes. I wanted to tell you right away, but I also wanted to make sure. Theo was up and around the table before she could finish the sentence, pulling her into his arms and burying his face in her hair. She smelled like citrus shampoo and hope, and he held her tight enough that she could probably feel his heart hammering against his chest. Are you happy? She whispered against his ear. Happy? Theo pulled back to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. Scarlett, I'm terrified and ecstatic and grateful and about a dozen other emotions I don't have names for. Terrified? Terrified that I'll mess it up again. Terrified that I'll let work take over, or that I'll fail you when you need me most, or that I'll miss something important because I'm too focused on the wrong things. Scarlett's eyes softened. Theo, you drive Oliver to daycare every Tuesday and Thursday so I can have studio time. You haven't missed a single doctor's appointment or parent-teacher conference. You turned down the Tokyo contract because it would have meant 3 weeks away from us. You're not the same man you were 2 years ago. What's pregnant mean? Oliver piped up from his chair, apparently having decided that the adult conversation was more interesting than his pancake fortress. Theo and Scarlett looked at each other, then at their son, who was regarding them with curious gray eyes that were still so much like his father's. It means, Scarlett said carefully, moving back to her chair and pulling Oliver into her lap, that you're going to be a big brother. There's a baby growing in Mama's tummy. Oliver's eyes went wide. A real baby? Like a little baby? A real baby, Theo confirmed, settling back into his chair but keeping one hand on Scarlett's arm, as if he needed the physical contact to prove this was really happening. Can I teach the baby about dinosaurs? Oliver asked seriously. Absolutely, Scarlett laughed. The baby will need to know all about dinosaurs, and trucks, and how to make pancake castles, and how to skip rocks at the lake. Oliver was getting more excited with each item on his list. All of those things, Theo agreed, his voice thick with emotion. You're going to be the best big brother. Oliver beamed at this pronouncement, then wriggled off Scarlett's lap and ran to the living room, presumably to share the news with his stuffed animals. Alone again, Theo reached for Scarlett's hand. How are you feeling about all of this? Honestly, scared, she admitted. Last time I was pregnant, I felt so alone, even when we were still married. I'm scared of going back to that place. You won't be alone this time, Theo said fiercely. I promise you, Scarlett. I will be there for every moment of this, every appointment, every midnight craving, every time you can't sleep because the baby is using your ribs as a jungle gym. Even if it means missing important meetings? Especially if it means missing important meetings. There is nothing more important than this, than you and Oliver and this baby. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. Nothing. Scarlett studied his face, and he could see her making the choice to trust him again, to believe in the man he'd fought so hard to become. I love you, she said simply. I love the father you've become and the partner you're learning to be, and the man who reads dinosaur stories in 12 different voices. I love you too, Theo replied. I love your strength and your art and the way you make everything feel like home. I love that you gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one, and that you're brave enough to give me another. From the living room came the sound of Oliver explaining to his teddy bear that he was going to have a baby sister or brother, and that the baby would probably like dinosaurs but might prefer trucks. And that was okay because trucks were also very cool. He's going to be such a good big brother, Scarlett murmured. He learned how to be caring and gentle from watching you, Theo said, just like I did. Outside, a mockingbird began its elaborate song, cycling through the calls of a dozen different species with joyful abandon. The morning light had shifted, becoming warmer and more golden, and somewhere in the house, Oliver was singing a song he'd made up about baby siblings and dinosaur adventures. So what happens now? Scarlett asked. Theo smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. Now we practice some more. We take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. We build something beautiful and messy and real. No more running away when things get difficult. No more running away, he confirmed. From anything. Ever. Scarlett leaned back in her chair, one hand resting on her still flat stomach, and for the first time since she'd found out about the pregnancy, she looked completely at peace. I can live with that, she said softly. And as Oliver's laughter echoed from the living room and the morning sun painted everything in shades of gold, Theo Lancaster realized that he had finally learned the most important lesson of his life, that true success wasn't measured in quarterly profits or stock prices or magazine covers. True success was measured in Saturday morning pancakes and dinosaur stories and the sound of his family's laughter filling his home. It was measured in second chances and the courage to be vulnerable, and the daily choice to show up even when it was hard. It was measured in love, imperfect, complicated, absolutely essential love. Your participation means a lot to the channel. What do you think about second chances in love? Would you have made the same choice as Scarlett to trust Theo again? Or do you believe some mistakes are too big to forgive? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.